It was the second week of my first semester at the University of Lagos. I was sitting under one of the big almond trees near the Faculty of Arts building, trying to finish a novel before my next class. The air was heavy with the smell of roasted corn from a nearby roadside cellar. Students passed by in clusters, laughing, trading lecture notes, some hurrying to catch their next class. That's when I saw him. Tunde. He wasn't the kind of man who demanded attention, at least not at first glance. He wasn't the loudest in the group he was walking with, but I noticed his eyes. Warm, searching, like he was always trying to figure people out before speaking. He slowed his pace when he saw me reading. "Isn't it too hot to be reading out here?" he asked, tilting his head toward my book. I looked up briefly. "Not for me." He smiled like I'd just given him an invitation. "I'm Tunde." He held out his hand. I took it reluctantly. "Feyikunmi." We didn't talk long that day. He asked what I was reading, I told him, and he left with a casual, "See you around." But I did see him around, more than I expected. In the cafeteria, in the library, outside lecture halls I knew weren't his. Always with a smile, always with a comment that made me laugh despite myself. Tunde had a way of making himself part of your routine without forcing it. At first it was, "Do you want company walking to class?" Then it was, "I saved you a seat." Before long, we were sharing meals in the cafeteria, exchanging books, and spending hours in the library pretending to study while whispering about everything except our assignments. One evening during exam season, we stayed in the library until the lights flickered to signal closing time. It was raining outside, the kind of heavy Lagos rain that made the whole world smell like wet earth. He offered me his jacket for the walk back to my hostel, even though he was soaked through by the time we arrived. That night he sent me a text that said, "I think you're the best part of my day." It wasn't a grand confession, but it was enough to make my heart race. By our second year, we were inseparable. We weren't loud about it, no public kisses or over-the-top displays, but everyone who knew us knew. He had this way of listening to me like my thoughts were worth more than gold. I, in turn, admired his quiet ambition and how he treated people with respect, whether they were professors or the janitors sweeping the lecture halls. It wasn't some fairy tale romance. We had disagreements about my tendency to overthink, about his occasional stubbornness, but even our arguments felt safe. Like no matter what, we'd find our way back. After graduation, reality set in fast. He got a job in a small IT firm, and I found work as an administrative assistant at a law office. The pay was nothing to brag about, but we were young and willing to start small. We saw each other on weekends, sometimes during the week if we could manage it. We learned the rhythm of Lagos together, dodging traffic jams, finding cheap places to eat, hunting for apartments we couldn't yet afford. By 2018, we were both a little more established. Tunde had been promoted, and I'd switched to a better paying job in a bank. That was when we decided to move in together. It wasn't glamorous. Our first apartment was a one-bedroom in a noisy neighborhood where the power cut out regularly. We learned to cook by candlelight, to laugh when the generator failed in the middle of a movie. We had dreams, though. A bigger place, children someday, travel. We made those plans over late-night cups of tea, feet tangled under thin bed sheets, feeling like we had all the time in the world. It was a Sunday afternoon in June 2018. We just returned from church and stopped by the beach. The sun was beginning to set, staining the water gold and orange. We were sitting on a log, my sandals off, toes buried in the sand, when he pulled a small box from his pocket. "I've been thinking," he said, his tone suddenly serious. I turned to him. "About what?" "About how I want to keep doing this, life, with you." He opened the box to reveal a modest but beautiful ring. "Feyikunmi, will you marry me?" I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I felt nervous and overwhelmed and impossibly happy. "Yes," I said, my voice barely louder than the waves. We didn't have the money for a big wedding, but that didn't matter. Our families gathered, our friends danced, and we became husband and wife in a small hall filled with music, food, and the belief that we were beginning something unshakable.
Married life wasn't perfect, but it felt solid. We lived in a 2-room flat in Surulere with noisy neighbors in a compound where kids played football until dusk. I loved our little home. The walls were cream, the curtains were mismatched because we bought them during a clearance sale, and the couch sagged in the middle. But it was ours. We had a rhythm. Tunde liked to wake before me and make tea, milky and sweet, just the way I liked it. I'd cook dinner most nights, often while he sat on the kitchen stool telling me about his day. Sometimes we'd argue about silly things like whose turn it was to do the dishes or whether we should spend our savings on a new TV or a weekend trip. We didn't have much, but there was warmth. On Saturdays, we'd go to the market together, haggling over tomatoes and yam, arguing in whispers over whether to buy meat from his favorite butcher or mine. At night, we'd sit outside in plastic chairs, talking about the future while mosquitoes buzzed around our ankles. We talked about children often. 2 girls and a boy, he'd say, like it was already settled. I wanted at least 1 daughter. We never imagined a future without each other in it. It was early 2022 when everything changed. I was offered a position at a financial services company in the UK. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid better than anything I could find in Laders, and came with a work visa. The night I told Tunde, he listened quietly as I explained the salary, the benefits, the opportunities it could open for us. "It's a big move," he said finally. "I know, but I could go first, settle in, and you could join me in a few months." We sat in silence for a while. I could see the calculation in his eyes, the same one I was doing in my head. The visa process for him would take time. We'd be apart, but the long-term gain could be worth it. Finally, he nodded. "We can do it. 6 months apart isn't so bad." It wasn't an easy decision. The night before I left, we lay in bed, fingers intertwined, whispering promises in the dark. He said, "Nothing will change us." I agreed. Nothing. The day I left Lagos, the air was thick and heavy with heat. My family and a few close friends came to the airport. Tunde stood beside me the whole time, one arm around my shoulder, as if he could hold me there a little longer. When it was time to go through security, I hugged everyone, saving him for last. "I'll be right behind you," he whispered into my ear. 6 months, maybe less. I tried to smile, but my throat ached. "Don't forget me." He pulled back to look me in the eyes. Impossible. We kissed, and then I turned and walked away. I didn't look back until I reached the escalator. He was still there, watching me, his hand raised in a small wave. On the plane, I cried quietly into a napkin, while a stranger pretended not to notice. I clung to the thought that the separation was temporary, that we'd be together again before the year ended. The UK was a shock to my system. The first week, I woke up at 5 a.m. every day, my body still tuned to Lagos time. The air was cold, even in April, the skies heavy with clouds. I learned quickly that people here didn't linger to chat. Everyone moved with purpose, their faces closed. I threw myself into work. My days were long, but they kept the loneliness at bay. In the evenings, I'd cook Nigerian meals, egusi, jollof, suya chicken.
just to make the flat smell like home. At first, Tunde and I spoke every night. He'd tell me about his day, the generator that broke down, the neighbor's new baby. We laughed about the small things, like how I kept mispronouncing street names. But as the months went by, our calls grew shorter. Sometimes he wouldn't pick up. Other times I'd be the one too tired to talk. The 6 months stretched into 8, then 10, and still his visa was delayed. When the 1-year mark approached, I had stopped counting down the days. I still believed that once he arrived, everything would go back to how it was. I had no idea how wrong I was. He arrived on a gray afternoon that smelled like wet metal. I stood at arrivals with a paper cup of tea cooling between my hands, rehearsing the moment in my mind the way you rehearse a speech. When he finally came through the frosted doors, I recognized the walk first, steady, unhurried, then the face, sharper than I remembered, framed by a beard I'd never seen in person. Tunde, the word came out small. He smiled, the polite kind you give a colleague. We hugged. It was firm, careful, not the melting relief I'd imagined. His hand patted my back twice, as if to say, "There, there." I told myself, jet lag, cabin air, 12 hours in a seat, give him time. On the train, I filled the silence with details. There's a Nigerian shop 5 minutes away. They sell proper pepper. I learned a new curry goat recipe. You'll love it. He nodded, eyes on the blurred fields. When I reached for his hand, he laced his fingers with mine, but his palm felt cool, like we were strangers sharing a bench. At home, I'd put up new curtains and ironed the bedding. I showed him where I kept a tea, how the boiler was temperamental, which cupboard stuck, the small domestic map of my year alone. He watched, attentive, but from a distance, like a tenant receiving a handover. That night, he fell asleep with his back to me. His breathing was soft and even. I lay awake, counting the seconds between each breath and telling myself stories about long journeys and tired bones. In the morning, he woke before me and went for a walk. He didn't say where. I made tea and set his cup by the window to keep warm. When he returned, he said, "Cold," as if the weather had personally offended him. I laughed, too brightly. "You'll get used to it." We didn't talk about the hug that didn't feel like us. The first week unfolded like a polite choreography. We moved around each other without bumping, two competent people sharing a small space. He unpacked slowly, folding shirts with precision that felt new. He put his phone on silent and kept it face down, a habit he hadn't had in Lagos. "Have you told your friends you arrived?" I asked one evening. "Some," he said, not looking up. "I'll tell the rest later." He started eating at odd hours. Once he reheated stew at 10 p.m., standing at the counter while I sat at the table and watched him. "You could have told me. I'd have warmed mine too." "Wasn't that hungry earlier," he replied, neutral, as if reporting the weather. On Saturday, I woke to a sound I hadn't heard in months, his unguarded laugh, the one that rolled from the chest. I walked to the kitchen, smiling before I could stop myself. He was by the window, phone to his ear. When he saw me, the laugh died mid-note. He turned the phone face down on the sill. "Who was that?" I asked lightly. "Just a friend from home." His tone was even, checking in. "Which friend?" He shrugged. "You don't know them." I waited for a name. None came. A bowl set in the sink, rinsed, but smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. Something citrusy and sharp. I told myself it was from the supermarket queue, someone's lingering scent. I opened the window wider. We took a Sunday walk along the canal. Ducks cut little V's in the water. I reached for his arm in a moment of cold wind.
He shifted to tuck both hands into his pockets. "Do you like it here?" I asked. "It's fine. Different. Different good or different bad?" He looked at the water. Different. That night, he set an alarm for 5:30 a.m. "He'll go for a run," he said. He'd never been a runner. I watched him lace the shoes we'd bought together the week before and wondered what else had arrived with him that I didn't recognize. Small things stacked like receipts in a drawer, the new cologne scent on his collar, the habit of locking his phone even to walk across the room, a message that flashed one afternoon, "Call me when you can," from a name I didn't know, quickly swiped away. I told myself about transition, about the shock of migration, about the way distance rewires the nervous system. Be patient, I thought. We are learning a new city and maybe a new version of each other. But my chest felt tight, like a room with the door closed and the window painted shut.
It happened on a Tuesday, a nothing day if not for what it held. I made rice and fried plantain. He came home later than usual, said traffic, though he'd walked. We ate quietly, the cutlery too loud. After dishes, he sat on the couch scrolling. I picked up a book and read the same paragraph 3 times. The room hummed with the boiler's soft complaint. Finally, I put the book down. "Tunde," I said. My voice sounded careful to my own ears. "What happened to us?" He looked up. For a heartbeat, I saw something like relief in his face, as if he'd been waiting for me to ask. Then it smoothed over. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I waited a year for you. I thought the hard part was the distance. But you're here, and I still miss you. You laugh into a phone I've never held. You wake before dawn to run away from the bed we shared. You feel far, even in this small room." He set the phone face down on his knee. The screen lit his palm. He took a breath. "I'm not the same man you left in Nigeria," he said, each word placed carefully on the table between us. "And you're not the same woman I came here for." The radiator clicked. My throat went dry. "Explain that." He looked at the rug, at the window, anywhere but me. "People change," he said finally. "You changed there. I changed here." "Here where?" I asked softly. "You weren't here." Silence. In it, I heard the hum of the fridge, the distant siren, the neighbor's muted TV. He stood then, slow, like the air had thickened. He said, "I'm tired," and walked to the bedroom. I stayed in the living room with the soft blue glow of the Wi-Fi router and the cup rings on the coffee table. His sentence kept looping. "You're not the same woman I came here for." Which woman had he come for? The one who made jollof in a one-bed kitchen in Surulere? The one who kissed him at Murtalai Muhammad and promised to hold the line? The one he phoned at midnight, time zones misaligned, both of us squinting into screens? Or another woman altogether, one whose name I didn't know, who laughed the laugh I'd heard through a half-closed kitchen door? I sat there long enough for the boiler to cycle off. When I finally joined him, he was already turned to the wall. I lay on my back and watched the ceiling until the dark reshaped itself into morning. Truth rarely arrives like thunder. It seeps, gathers, swells, until you realize your socks are wet and you're standing in it. In the days after the Tuesday, I moved through the flat like someone trying not to disturb a sleeping child. He kept the same early runs, the phone stayed face down, our speech narrowed to logistics, groceries, bins, post. I smiled at work and said, "Fine, thanks," to people who asked, because I could not explain a grief without a funeral. Then, one afternoon, I opened the hall cupboard to find a spare charger. A jacket slipped from the hook. A restaurant receipt fell from its pocket, dated 2 weeks earlier, for a place I've been wanting to try. 2 mains, 1 dessert, the time stamped 21:43. "We went there?" I asked that evening, as gently as one can ask a question whose answer already hurts. He didn't look up from tying his laces. "Met an old friend." "In a city you've lived in for 12 days? He paused, just long enough for the pause to answer for him, then stood. "I'll be late," he said, and left. That night, while he showered, his phone buzzed on the dresser. I did not touch it. I stood in the doorway and watched the screen light with the message preview I couldn't fully see. When he came out, steam trailing, he picked it up without meeting my eyes, typed a reply, turned the screen down. I remembered the early years, the library rain, the jacket he'd given me, his text that said, "You're the best part of my day." I tried to stitch those memories over the quiet between us like a patch over a tear. The fabric wouldn't hold. A week later, the truth sent me an invitation I could not pretend to misplace. He left his laptop opened on the table, half-packed for a morning appointment. A notification banner bloomed in the corner, a cloud backup finishing, thumbnails flicking past. I turned away, then back again, the way you do when you see your name in a crowd. 1 thumbnail held. 2 people in a restaurant I recognized. Him, this new bearded version, and a woman I'd never seen. She leaned in. He had that soft, unguarded smile he hadn't given me since the airport. The photo was dated 3 months before his flight. There were others. Street angles, coffee cups, little ordinary moments that add up to a life. I closed the laptop. I didn't open anything. I didn't need to. The knowing had been living with us for weeks. Now it had a face. That evening, I cooked anyway. Habit is a kind of raft. He came home tired, or wearing tired as a coat. We ate quietly. The fork scraped his plate. "I saw a photo," I said, placing the words down like fragile glass. "From before you left, you looked happy." He didn't deny, he didn't confess. He placed his fork carefully on the rim of the plate and said, almost kindly, "I told you, I'm not who I was." And who am I, if not the woman you came for? He looked at me then, properly, for the first time since arrivals. Something like ecology flickered and went out. He said, "I don't know." And there it was, the truest thing in the room. We washed dishes side by side. His sleeve brushed mine once. I thought of the girl under the almond tree with the book and the man who asked a 3rd time, of the beach and the ring and the promises we whispered into salt air. I thought of the airport escalator and the hand raised in a small wave. How long does a wave last? A second? A season? A year? That night, we slept in the same bed and on different continents. In the morning, he ran. I sat at the window with tea and watched the canal swans write their white signatures across the water. Some endings are loud and final. Ours was quiet. We did not shout. We did not break plates. We woke, worked, ate, slept,
and learned the tender bureaucracy of two people who loved each other across a bridge that had washed away. People ask sometimes if I regret leaving first. I think of the woman in the photos and the way he laughed in my kitchen, and I tell them, distance doesn't build a person you don't already carry inside. The year apart did not invent him. It revealed him. It revealed me too. The part that holds on until the rope burns and then, finally, lets go. The man I waited for never boarded that plane. The man who arrived is kind enough not to slam doors and distant enough to leave them open. We share a roof, a council tax bill, a history. We do not share a future, not the one we named on a Lagos balcony while generators hummed like promises. In my quietest moments, I set 2 mugs on the counter and put one back. I open the window and let in the cold. I am learning the sound of my own company again. The scrape of chair legs, the kettle's small crescendo, the whisper of a book turning its own page. If he laughs in the kitchen now, I do not go to the doorway. I let the sound rise and fade like a siren on a distant street. I do not chase it. I make tea. I sit. I breathe. And when the phone lights up, face down on the table, I turn my eyes to the window where the afternoon sky, gray and honest, does not pretend to be anything else.